All right, Shalom Israel. First and foremost, as always, I would like to give all praises, honor, glory, respect, and blessings to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rachaha Kwadash. Salutations to the Lord's elect on the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth and sincerity while patiently waiting for Yahweh Shai's return, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, which have taught us everything we know through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. And this is going to be another one of those early morning videos. As you can see, it is 11:26 at the top left corner of my screen. And this lesson is going to be about they worship, they know not what. And this is going to be a video that is centered around so-called Easter. Now, of course, we make these videos again from time to time again because this truth is a ongoing, flowing river type of thing of ours. And you always got guys who come into this truth that are new. And, you know, maybe last year they celebrated Easter when they was in the world. Maybe 3 years and a half ago, they celebrated Easter when they before they came into the truth. So, you know, here it is, 2026. They're just coming into the fold, and you know, it's important that they know about these things, because Easter, the world of Easter, is not associated with the Messiah of the Holy Scriptures, you know. Because see, whenever these goddamn Americans get to opening their mouth about Easter, you see a picture of a big-eyed bunny, 2 long ears, a big smile on the face with 2 buck teeth showing in the front. And basically, the bunny is surrounded by eggs. And none of that shit has anything to do with the Messiah of the Holy Scriptures. None of it has anything to do with the worship of the Israelites of the Holy Scriptures. Hence, a part of what the title of this video is called, They Worship, They Know Not What. And the they is speaking of the people of the world. And not just the people of the world. It also alludes to you so-called Christians, who are the forerunners of the worship of this wicked holiday called Easter. And there's many different ties and religions that Easter is tied to. And it mainly has its ties and its roots, which goes back to Ishtar. Now, if you don't know anything about Ishtar is supposed to be the female goddess of fertility, growth, prosperity, life, you see. And when people look at a bunny, when you observe a bunny is known for, bunnies are known for their fertility. They're known for having babies. Bunnies are known for having lots of babies. So Easter is also tied to that Queen of Heaven worship. And we all know that the proper way of spelling queen is Quean, not Quen. Okay, Quen is the improper way of spelling queen. And the reason why the real way to spell queen is Quean is because there's a such thing called Newspeak. And if you know anything about Newspeak is responsible for the pronunciation and the changing of the pronunciation, as well as the changing of the definition of certain words. So when Newspeak came around, people would hear the word like rape, for an example, and they would think of a woman that got her ass beat and basically forced into submission and into having sex, when rape really goes back to the old English rapere, which means to seize or grab. So there was a lot of changing of the definition of words, transitioning from the Dark Ages going into the Renaissance period, in which Newspeak is also a part of, the Renaissance language, which would heavily impact the pronunciation as well as the definition of certain words. So you go into Easter and they tell you that, it was, part of, because Easter, here it is, right? Easter is supposed to be tied to the Passover, right? So we know that right about this time of the year, we know that the Messiah was born. Okay, Yahweh, that the Holy Scriptures tell you that the Messiah of the Holy Scriptures, Yahweh Shai, he was born around the time of the Passover. Okay, and usually around the time of the Passover, it'll start to warm up outside. It'll start raining. The sun will start providing life to grass, plants, trees, bushes, leaves on trees so they can grow, sprout, flowers, particular flowers on trees so they can grow and sprout. So, we know that the Messiah, he is also tied to life. Okay? He is also tied to life. Hence, we know that he was born around the time of the Passover. But like it tells you in 2nd Esdras, the 16th chapter, right? That there will be mass confusion on the earth. Because here it is, the Messiah was supposed to be born around the time of the Passover, right? Which is Easter, according to the book of Acts, right? But then the self-proclaimed white man, who are the biblical Edomites, the ones responsible for running the United States government, will turn around to tell you that the Messiah's birthday was in the month of December. So how the fuck can his birthday be in the month of December? Which is all tied back to that Roman Catholic garbage, okay, that Roman Catholic trash, because, first off, there's no such thing as no 12 months in the Holy Scriptures. There's only 10 months in a year. So we could just stop right there, because everybody's a lot older than they think they are. But we understand why Esau added 2 months to the calendar, because it was really to buy himself time. He's trying to extend his rulership and his rulership and power. But okay, a new year does not begin around December. Okay. So technically speaking, if you really want to be technical, we're not even in the month of April. Because if you take 2 months out of the year, right? If you take November and December and just leave the 10 months going all the way down to October, right? We should really be in the month of June. Technically speaking, right? We should be in the month of June. But again, you know, because these devils added 2 months onto the year, therefore we're so-called in the month of April. And I say so-called because January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, November, and December are nowhere mentioned in the Holy Scriptures. And ultimately, these different calendars that I just named, they all go back to so-called Roman gods or Roman emperors, if you will, which some of the Roman emperors were revered as gods. Okay, like August was named after Augustus, who had the longest rule in the Roman Empire. July goes back to Julius Caesar. Okay, now I'm just naming a couple examples. I don't need to name them all. You know, the whole month of February is all tied into women worship, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that people do not understand who they worship, because if you know the Messiah was born around the time of the Passover, okay, what the Holy Scriptures calls Easter in the book of Acts, you would know that Yahushua was born around the time of spring, when everything begins anew. Okay? So Yahushua would have been born around this time of the year. Which is when spring begins. In which springtime represents the rebirth of life, right? Showing you that the Messiah's birth was even spiritual, because ultimately, who would be responsible for the revival of the nation of Israel being brought back to life? That would happen through Yahushua's blood that was shed for many of the nation of Israel. And we know when he said many, he was talking about the elect of the nation of Israel, because ultimately Yahushua did cover the sins of the whole nation of Israel when his blood was shed. But it starts with the sins of the elect, because 2/3 of our people, okay, according to biblical prophecy, they're going to die here in America in these last days, as it is written in the book of Zechariah 13 verse 9. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, that in all the land, now you go to that word land, it goes back to the Hebrew word aratizah. And under the definition for that Hebrew word, you see the word country or region. And in this case, that country or region where our people is going to be judged at is going to be in the country of Babylon the Great, which would be the United States of America. The United States of America, which is known as Babylon the Great in the book of Revelation, also known as Babylon in the Old Testament, like books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so on. So okay, what was the point I wanted to make? America basically our 2/3 of our people are going to perish here. But like Yahushua said, the red wine that you would drink during the Passover represented his blood of the New Testament for many, for the remission of sins, which starts with the elect of the nation of Israel. The rest of our people here in America, they're going to be cut off and die, according to Zechariah 13 verse 8. So So we know that the Passover always happens around springtime, when life begins anew. And in these last days, we know that life began anew when the Heavenly Father sent the Holy Spirit down to Abba Bivens to begin teaching the gospel, which led to the awakening of certain men who we see teaching today, from Abba Bivens. From the awakening of other men, such as King Masha, High Priest Ariah, Elder Yaquab, okay, King Masha, High Priest Ariah, and Elder Yaquab. Forgive me if I might have missed any names. And then, High Priest Ariah, Elder Yaquab, and King Masha, they ended up waking up the elders and the men, the leaders of our nation who we see today, which starts with Elder Apostle Tahar, Elder Apostle Gabar, Elder Apostle Ariamalab, and Elder Apostle Rakah. Okay, so those men is what led to the Great Awakening when their ministries began to go on YouTube. So, which would be the fulfillment of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, where the Lord said that there will be a great exceeding army which will stand upon their feet. And we know that to be the elect of the nation of Israel. Okay. So, everything is spiritual. We know that Yahushua was born around the Passover, which the Passover happens around springtime, which springtime represents rebirth of life. And Yahushua, his shed being shed for the nation of Israel, started with the elect, led to the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Well, it led to the rebirth back to life to the elect of the nation of Israel happening in these last days. So again, people have been dumbed down so much that they believe that bunny lay eggs. Bunnies lay eggs and all the other silly shit, and they have no idea what America's Easter really goes back to. It really goes back to Ishtar and the worshiping of false gods. Okay, and then on top of that, the Holy Scriptures tells you that so-called Easter, which is the Passover, happens around, I believe, the second week after the new moon. Okay. So, the Sabbath is supposed to be on the new moon. And then on top of that, right, the Sabbath is based upon the new moon. So there's no way the Sabbath is a stationary day like it's every Friday, Saturday to Sunday, sundown. Now, sometimes the new moon will fall on a Friday, sundown to Saturday, sundown. But that's not going to be every month. Hence, the word moon literally means month. Okay, I believe the Hebrew word there for moon is Kadash, Kadash, which is Chaaadash, Kadash, Chadash, which means moon. Well, I guess you could say new moon. So, the Sabbath is based upon the new moon, which is also the day of the Passover. And even on the night of the Passover, even on the night of the Passover, you're supposed to get rid of all leavening in your dwelling places. Okay. And this is really to ensure that you don't eat leavening on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because the night of the Passover is also the very same time wherein the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins. So you can understand, the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins around the night of the Passover, which begins when the sun goes down. You know, but here it is on Easter, you know, America's Easter. You got people eating chocolate chip cookies, eating brownies. Okay, they're over here. You know, they wake up in the morning, they're eating French toast, pancakes with butter, eggs and pork bacon, thinking they're worshiping who the world ignorantly calls Jesus. But in actuality, you're worshiping a false deity. You're worshiping some false gods, because America's Easter has nothing to do with the Messiah or the Holy Scriptures. Okay, first off, Yahweh Easter is tied to suffering. Okay, on the very same night of the Passover, or on the very same day of the Passover, the Messiah underwent excruciating pain, humility, suffering, embarrassment. Okay, he was betrayed by his own people. He was mocked at, spat on, punched, kicked, you know. So Yahweh's last Passover here on earth was not a day of rejoicing. It was not a day of celebration, in a sense that, you know, music was playing in the background, people were dancing, you know. No, you heard the spirit of laughter in the air. You see? So Yahweh's Passover was not associated with this spirit of mirth. Yahweh's Passover was associated with heaviness, sorrow, mourning. And America's Easter, or a so-called Passover, does not give off that type of image or vibration. Okay, America's Passover gives off the complete opposite. You know, on America's Passover, your children are celebrating it. There were no children at Yahweh's Passover. Okay, when Yahushua held his Passover, he had grown-ass men with him. Okay? They were all grown men. Okay, they had mustaches, they had beards. There weren't no little boys or girls there. But on America's Passover, you got boys and girls looking for eggs that have been dyed, not knowing that when you dye your eggs certain colors, that the dyeing of eggs really goes back to when I believe in the very first Passover, the eggs which came from chickens were dyed in blood. They were dipped in blood, which was tied to a satanic ritual. So look, it had absolutely nothing to do with Yahushua's Passover. Okay, there was no bunnies hopping around Yahushua when he was sitting at the dinner table getting ready to break bread with his disciples. You ain't hear about no goddamn bunnies jumping around, man. So again, America's Passover, which you people celebrate, which the Passover is what the world ignorantly calls Easter, right? America's Passover has nothing to do with the Passover of the Messiah, point blank, period. You know, got kids and children running around looking for eggs and shit. Eating chocolate. You know, some of you motherfuckers had fried pork chop on the night of the Passover, which the real Passover started last Wednesday at sundown. Okay, which is when the new moon came in earlier this month. It fell upon a Wednesday sundown, which happened on the 1st of this month. Okay, so the Sabbath is determined by the new moon, and the new moon fell on a Wednesday sundown, and the Passover happens on the Sabbath. It begins on the Sabbath, which is based upon the new moon. But here it is, right? This past Sunday, everybody held their Passover. There were shopping malls that were closed. Many restaurants were closed because this was supposed to be a national holiday. Meanwhile, you still had security officers going to work. And technically, you're not supposed to work on the day of the Passover. So that means that yesterday, every place should have been closed. The grocery stores, Walmart was still open yesterday. Like, come on, you know? How the fuck are people working at Walmart on the Passover? How you still working at your grocery store on the Passover? So this whole country is a fucking joke, okay? This whole country is a fucking joke. But I don't want to get too off topic. You know, not to get too off topic. The point is that, you know, you people here in America, you worship you know not what. But we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Israelites, starting with the elect, the 1/3 of the nation of Israel, which will be the 144,000, and the rest of the multitude, which are all Israelites, which were redeemed from the foundation of the earth. With that, I'm going to say shalom. Is on to the next one.